Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Westward the Wilderness by B.N. Rundell, narrated by Scott Miller. Chapter 1. Departure. The long-legged black stallion stepped out, excited to be back on the trail. It had been a long winter, but the herd of mustangs held by the Osage had more than its share of mares that would not soon forget the Andalusian-bred stallion. The beautiful 16-hand stud had been purchased from a band of gypsies as they traveled through eastern Pennsylvania, with a stop at Philadelphia and the Stonecroft estate. The elder Stonecroft made the 2-year-old colt a present for his son that was to enter the university that fall, and the two had been inseparable ever since. Gabriel Stonecroft, now known as Gabe Stone, and his lifelong friend Ezra Blackwell left Philadelphia 1 year ago this spring, with a pack of ne'er-do-well bounty hunters hot on their trail. Gabe had become the object of their hunt when he killed the son of a prominent and wealthy merchant known only as Old Man Wilson. The man had been known for his penchant of stopping at nothing to accomplish his goals, whether in business, social, or personal affairs. He had doted on his only son and repeatedly bailed him out of trouble, teaching the young man that wealth and rank had privileges, and they were above the law. But that attitude had given the young man the idea that he could do whatever he chose, and would often make uncomely advances toward the young women of Philadelphia society. It was one of those shunned advances that prompted Gabe to defend the honor of his sister and confront Jacob Wilson, which resulted in the duel. But even then, Gabe sought to spare the man's life. But when he refused to abide by the code duello, he had no choice but to shoot, and his shot was lethal. But that resulted in the two friends leaving their homes and families to spare them the reprisals of Old Man Wilson. Now, after spending the winter with the Osage people, the two friends reluctantly departed the village of their friends to follow their long-held dream of exploring the wilderness west of the Mississippi River. It was into the land of La Louisiane that had been ceded to the Spanish in 1763. But living in the seat of the young government of the colonies made Gabe privy to information that led him to understand that all the territory between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean was land that the new government coveted and hoped to one day add to the young nation. Gabe and Ezra had long talked about the wilderness, and they shared the dream of one day exploring the unknown lands. This was a dream birthed in the woods of Pennsylvania when the two boys wandered, hunted, and shared imaginations. They had always seen themselves as great adventurers, and the circumstances brought on by the duel had now made it possible. But the friends rode silently, somewhat morose as they hunched their shoulders to the morning chill and let the horses have their head. It was just an hour's ride to the trading post of Utoe, known as Fort Carondelet, and the two-story structure came into sight just as the first gray light of morning pierced the shadows of the woods beside them. One man was swinging a double-bladed axe, splitting some wood for their fires. Between swings, the movement from the trees caught his attention, and he reached for the rifle leaning against the tree. But a hail from Gabe, "Ho, we're friendly, needin' supplies," stopped the man. He couldn't blame the man for being a little skittish. Just last fall, shortly after the post was built, they had been raided by some freebooters who killed all the traders and looted the post. But the winter had been good to them, and Utoe's post had done well. Gabe and Ezra stepped down, tethering the horses at the hitch rail, and asked, "Got any coffee on?" "Oui, you bet," answered the wood splitter, burying the head of the axe in the stump and grabbing an armload of firewood. His pants legs were tucked in the top of his tall lace-up boots, and galluses stretched over his shoulders to hold the breeches at a respectable height. A long-sleeved, faded red Union suit served to cover the mass of hair that sought escape above the last button by the man's neck. He had a pencil-thin mustache that barely showed with his week's growth of whiskers darkening his face. But friendly eyes shone from under the thick eyebrows, and a broad smile showed white teeth, an oddity of the times and area. He pushed open the door with his foot and spoke over his shoulder. "I am Jacques Menard, and my partner," nodding his head toward the interior, "is John Smith, and he says he has no kin among the many Smiths that populate this great country." Gabe introduced himself and Ezra, and asked, "So, how are you supplied after that raid by that bunch of crooks?" They had stepped down, tethered the horses, and followed Jacques into the post. "Oh, we are well supplied. When we," he motioned to his partner and himself, "came from St. Louis, we brought several wagons of supplies. Those we did not keep went to the fort on the Verdigris. Now, what can we help you with, monsieur?" "Well, sir, we need some of just 'bout everything. Staples, lead, powder, and such. But we also need some information," began Gabe, handing a list of needs to the trader. The man looked at the list, handing it to Smith, and leaned on his elbows on the counter and asked, "And just what kind of information?" Gabe stood with one side at the counter, his arm outstretched and palm on the counter, as he looked at Jacques and asked, "We're going west, but I'm thinking the best way west is to go north to the Missouri River and follow it a spell. Maybe take the Platte River on west, or even the upper end of the Missouri. But I was wondering what you might know as to the whereabouts of any other traders, or about any other routes west." Oui, monsieur, je comprends. I have been in the posts of Chouteau on the Missouri, and I have heard others talk about the west. If you go north before the Missouri bends to the north, there is a post among the Otoe, or Missouri Indians. It is a post of Chouteau. I have heard others speak of a new fort farther north, above the mouth of the Platte, put in by James Mackey, and there is talk of another even further upstream, well past the confluence with the Niobrara River. But I do not know if that one is there or not. And what about the Indians? What tribes, and are they friendly?" Jacques stood upright, leaned on the counter, and showing a broad smile. "Ah, difficile à savoir. The Indians, so many and so different. Friendly today, enemy tomorrow. But the Otoe and Missouri near the Chouteau post, they are friendly. But the Sioux and Pawnee, who knows?" Gabe looked at Ezra and back at Jacques. "Then if you worked at the Chouteau post among them, put together some trade goods they might like and add it to the stack." Oui. Most Indians want to trade for muskets. Should I include some?" "Yes, put 4 on the stack. Add molds, lead, and powder, and call it good." By just a little past mid-morning, they were back on the trail, and Ezra asked, "So tell me again how we're going west but traveling north." Gabe chuckled. "While I was at the university, as you know, I did considerable study of what is known as the Western lands. There have been expeditions by the Spaniards going back as far as early 1500s, Coronado, de Vaca, Cabrillo, and others, but most of their explorations are in the south. Now, in the north, there have been forays by the French, but one fable always fascinated me, about the lost brethren of the Welsh. Supposedly, a light-skinned people that speak some words that sound Welsh and have lighter-colored hair are thought to be descendants of Prince Madoc and his followers that were rumored to have emigrated around 1170. And there are also those that believe those same people are actually descendants of Norsemen." "Welsh and Norsemen, if that don't beat all," answered Ezra, shaking his head. I know. However, since we're in the neighborhood, and just how far north is this neighborhood?" asked Ezra, skeptically. "Well, according to Jacques, a week, 10 days, and maybe more. But if we see a likely-looking route that beckons, there's nothing that says we can't take it," suggested Gabe. The men fell silent, contemplative, considering, until Ezra spoke. Norsemen, Welsh, French traders and missionaries, Spaniards exploring and trading. Add in all the Indians, and just what is it that we're going to be exploring that hasn't already been seen by all these? Gabe chuckled. It seems to me I've heard you quote the Bible where it says, "There is no new thing under the sun." And all this time I had visions of us standing where no man had ever stood before, high up on some mountaintop, overlooking our vast domain, and thinking we would be the first men to see it. He turned in his saddle, one hand on the pommel and the other on the cantle, looking at Gabe. "You, sir, have shattered my dream." Gabe reined up and turned to look at his friend. He stretched out one arm, made a sweeping motion before them. "Tell me, dreamer, how many people do you see?" Ezra frowned, looked in the direction they traveled. "Why, none. And this is just a few days west of the Mississippi, and you see no one. And when we were with the Osage on the buffalo hunt, how many people other than the Osage did you see?" Ezra nodded his head. "Again, I say none. And you don't think that the further north and west we travel, the land will be even less populous than what we've seen?" "I certainly hope so. But still, with all those you spoke about, don't you think we'll bump into some? Perhaps a few. Hopefully we'll find other traders as we need. But I am certain we will pass many a day that we do not see another living being. And when we get to those mountains, I would also believe that we will find many a place that has never seen the passage of man." Gabe gigged the big black forward, leading the way as he trailed the sorrel pack-horse. Ezra kicked his bay alongside Gabe and said, "The first place we find like that, I'm going to build me a cabin and stay right there." "Oh, you are you? Why?" "'Cause that's where I want to be, where there ain't nobody else." "But Ezra, wherever you are, there you'll be, and it will no longer be a place where there is nobody, because you'll be there." Ezra scowled, looked at his friend. "Oh, yeah, you're right." He paused, thinking. "But there won't be anybody else. Not unless you find another Indian woman that thinks you're a good candidate for a husband. You know, like Gray Fox of the Osage. For a while there, I thought you'd be staying behind with her." Ezra's shoulders slumped, and he hung his head, and answered just above a whisper, "For a while there, I thought so too." They rode quietly, remembering their time with the Osage and the women that had become so special to them. It had been very tempting to stay, for the villagers had become their friends, and they would have been welcomed. But there was always the possibility of Old Man Wilson upping the bounty, and more freebooters being tempted to come into the wilderness after the reward. The people of the village would feel honor-bound to join the fight as they had done before, but neither Gabe nor Ezra wanted any of their Osage friends to be harmed because of the evil deeds of a vengeful man. And so they chose to leave and continue their journey to the west in fulfillment of their lifelong dream. Gabe broke the reverie when he pointed with his chin. "Looks like we got us a river to cross." He lifted his eyes to the sky. "It'll be dusk soon. We've got plenty of time. We can cross over and make camp on the other side. Maybe you can get us some fresh meat." Ezra pointed to their left. "We gonna cross that crick and then the river, or we gonna do it all to once and cross below there?" nodding his head to the bigger stream. "Let's take a closer look-see," proposed Gabe, gigging the black to the riverbank. As they looked at the murky and slow-moving water, Gabe said, "I think it'll be just as easy to cross here." He pointed across the stream that was about 75 feet wide. "Looks like a decent campsite on the sandbank there. Or up above there, in the trees. Looks to be more grass for the horses." The crossing proved to be easy. good gravel bottom and water barely deep enough to get the horses' bellies wet. Ezra's choice of a campsite proved to be the best, and Gabe offered to get the camp and fire ready as Ezra started toward the brushy riverbank in hopes of bagging a deer for their supper. Gabe rubbed all the horses down with handfuls of grass, tethered them where they could reach ample graze, and with all the gear stacked under the trees, he started the fire for the evening. He gathered an armload of dry wood and positioned the fire under the long-reaching branches of the big oak, knowing the new buds and leaves would dissipate the smoke. They had learned that as they traveled. They gathered any edibles that were readily available. At the edge of the river they found some fresh shoots of cattail, and had gathered a hatful to add to the fresh deer meat that would be fried in the bear fat from the bear taken last winter while with the Osage. Ezra soon returned, triumphant, with a young buck across his broad shoulders and grinning ear to ear. Gabe greeted him with, "Looks like a nice one. Bet he'll be nice and tender. I'll get things started while you slice up some steaks from the backstrap." Ezra answered, "You know, I kinda like this arrangement. You know, you cooking and me hunting. Don't let it go to your head, my friend. That's only 'cause we ain't in enemy territory. From what Jacques said, any Indians we run into between here and the Missouri River are mostly friendly. So it don't hurt for you to shoot that Lancaster rifle of yours. Otherwise, I have to do the hunting with my bow." I know, but still," he moaned, "I'll just enjoy it while I can." Chapter 2. Missouria. The low-rolling hills interspersed with grass-covered flatlands offered few trails other than the occasional game trail. The early start on the day's travel had given the two friends ample time on the move, but the thick woods often made the journey slow going. Gabe sat back, looking at the trees, trying to identify the variety of hardwoods and others. He especially enjoyed the dogwoods, bringing forth the sweet-smelling white flowers, and the redbud, with its bright purple blossoms that gave the woods a variety of colors only seen in the springtime. The tall elm and oak seemed to anchor the forest, while the smaller ash, walnut, and cypress offered shade and homes to the many forest creatures, most of whom chattered their warnings to the passers-by. It was a good day to travel. The sky was void of clouds, the air was springtime cool, and the horses were glad to be on the trail and stepped out to a lively gait, heads bobbing, ears forward, and often found the game trails before their riders. They kicked a few deer out of their beds, sent some rabbits and squirrels scampering, and heard the alarm cries of circling hawks. The world was alive with the newness of spring, and they enjoyed an occasional glimpse of a spotted fawn trying its legs for its first steps, or a black bear cub taking a tumble down a hillside. After their midday break and brief rest, they were again on the move, making the best of the good weather. As the long branches of the tall timber cradled the sun, just long enough for Old Sol to paint the sky with its muted shades of gold and orange, the two friends searched for a clearing with nearby water for their night's stop. They were about to break from the timber when Gabe reined up, holding his hand up to stop Ezra. He motioned his friend forward and to his side, and stood in his stirrups to scan beyond the trees. "I don't like it. The hair on my neck is telling me something's wrong, and Ebony's ears haven't stopped twitching." Ezra quietly stepped down, rifle in hand, and slowly walked forward, using the trees for cover. He froze in place, one foot lifted, then slowly lowered it into the tall grass. He lowered himself to one knee, while motioning for Gabe to join him. They were on a slight rise overlooking a grassy meadow that bordered a small winding river. In the grassy flats over 300 yards distant, a band of Indians were making their camp. Most were erecting lean-tos, others tending horses, some bringing firewood, and many women busy making ready to cook a meal. Several warriors, still horseback, came from the trees, and many rode horses with fresh-killed deer draped over their haunches. "What tribe you reckon they are?" asked Ezra, watching the activity of the people. "Dunno for sure, but this area is supposed to be Missouri country." "They friendly?" asked Ezra. "Supposed to be, but can't never tell." Gabe looked to his friend. "Why, you planning on inviting them to supper?" "No, but I wouldn't mind getting an invitation. Besides, ain't we supposed to be neighborly and introduce ourselves? What if they decide to have you for supper?" asked Gabe, chuckling. "Ha! You know Indians don't like dark meat. You're the one that should be scared, 'cause I did hear that most of these natives kinda hanker to white meat." Gabe looked at his friend, laughed, and stood up to return to his horse. "Well, come on. If we're going to be neighborly, 'tain't polite to wait till the last minute when all the work is done." As they rode from the trees, they were side by side, both men holding their reins in one hand, the other on their thigh, near the holster of their saddle pistol. They were immediately spotted by the warriors, and several turned their mounts to face the intruders. Gabe raised his hand and spoke loudly. "Aho!" 3 warriors started their horses toward the 2 men that approached their camp, spread out to block the way. The man in the middle raised his open hand and answered, "Aho!" Using sign language, Gabe asked if they spoke any language of the white men. The leader answered no, then asked if Gabe spoke any language of the natives. Gabe grinned, spoke some words in Osage, until the man, after chuckling a little, spoke in English. "I know your language. I learned from traders of the British. Who are you, and why are you here on our land?" "I am Gabe. This is Ezra, and we're just passing through, going north and west to the far mountains. Who are you and your people?" "We are Nutachi, but there are those that call us Missouria. You spoke words of the Osage. Do you know them?" "Yes, we wintered with Bluecorn's people, but you never told me your name," said Gabe, waiting. "I am Strong Bull. Our people are going to the west for our buffalo hunt." He leaned to the side to look at the heavy-laden pack horses and asked, "You have come to trade?" "We can trade. We have some goods you might like," answered Gabe, glancing at Ezra. "Then you are welcome to our village. We will eat, and then we will trade," said Strong Bull, reining his horse around and motioning for Gabe and Ezra to follow. Lame Deer and Fawn of the Morning, Strong Bull's woman and daughter, prepared a sumptuous meal of deer meat, given by Ezra, and squash and beans from their dried winter stores. Strong Bull was anxious to get the trading started, as he had eyed the trade rifles on Gabe's pack horse. But Strong Bull had little that Gabe wanted. But after much bickering and including 2 other couples of the band, Gabe settled for 2 sets of buckskins, a pair of high-topped beaded moccasins, and a beaded possibles bag, and Strong Bull had his rifle and accoutrements. But because the Missouria wore breechcloths and leggings, they would have to wait another day for the women to finish the buckskin breeches, 1 set for each of them. And since the Missouria had planned on staying in this camp for another day, it would be a good opportunity to learn more about these people. Gabe and Ezra stood as Gabe said, "We will make our camp there in the trees across the water," pointing with his chin. "Send someone over with word when the work is done." Strong Bull stood, holding his new rifle with pride. He looked at Gabe, smiling. "I will have Fawn of the Morning bring them to you. She and her mother will make them special for you." At his word, Lame Deer held a tunic across the shoulders of Gabe, then with a piece of cord measured him for a proper fit of the breeches. Fawn of the Morning, a young woman of about 13 summers, did the same for Ezra. The women stepped away, spoke to Strong Bull in their language, and Bull said to Gabe, "After the midday meal." Gabe and Ezra shook hands with Bull and went to their horses to go to their camp. As they prepared their camp at the edge of the trees, just back from the thick brush at the bank of the river, Ezra spoke. "You let Bull have that rifle a mite cheap, didn't you?" Gabe chuckled as he stripped the gear from the pack horses. "Yeah, but we made a friend, and that can be more valuable than anything." Ezra, wiping down his bay with a handful of grass, replied, "Yeah, s'pose you're right, but I was hoping to get me a set of moccasins. Mine are getting a mite thin." "Well, we'll go back over a little early, and maybe we can do some more trading and get you some." The men had been asleep for a good while when Gabe suddenly came awake. He moved only his eyes, listening and looking, for he knew something had awakened him. He heard Ebony stomp his feet and snort, and Gabe glanced his way to see the big stallion head up, eyes wide and ears pricked, looking towards the river. Gabe slowly moved his head to look, grasping his belt pistol in his left hand, and feeling for his Ferguson rifle with the other. The dim light from the stars and half-moon in the clear night gave him a good view of the meadow beyond the stream, and everything looked quiet. He sat up slowly, looking again at Ebony, who still showed alarm. He stealthily got to his feet, stuffed the pistol back in his belt, slipped the possibles bag and powder horn over his shoulder, and lifted the Ferguson, muzzle down and butt at his shoulder. He quietly brought it to full cock as he searched the trees nearby and across the river. A whisper came from Ezra. "What is it?" "Dunno," answered Gabe, also in a whisper. Ezra was at his side, rifle in hand, as they stepped behind trees nearer the water. "There, to the right at the trees," came the whispered warning from Ezra. Gabe looked as directed, and movement showed in the moonlight. Several warriors were crawling through the tall grass toward the village. Gabe glanced at the moon, then to the eastern sky, and realized these attackers were unable to be seen from the village, and were getting into position to attack the village at first light. "We've got to warn them." "How?" asked Ezra. Gabe nodded and began backing away from the river and into the thicker trees. He looked at Ezra. "Think you can cross over downstream and come back to Bull's camp and not be seen?" "Yeah, but what about you?" "I think I can do more damage if I catch 'em from behind, keep 'em from getting away. If I cross over there," pointing upstream toward the trees beyond the clearing, "maybe I can get to their horses, then hit 'em from behind, and we'll catch 'em 'tween us." Ezra nodded and said, "I'll get my saddle pistol, too. It's a good thing that river ain't more'n a crick and not but knee-deep. I just hope I don't get my head shot off by some of Bull's warriors." "You can do it. You're better in the woods than anybody, including me." When Ezra came from the water, he stood quietly, looking through the thin brush and trees for any sign of a lookout. He moved in a crouch, measuring each step carefully, watching through the dim light for any sign of alarm. He started to move past a big oak when he heard movement, something brushing the bark of the tree, and froze. One warrior, a young buck, leaned against the tree, using a lance to steady himself as his head drooped. Ezra waited till the lookout stood still, then stepped around the tree and put his hand over the man's mouth and his forearm, pushing him tight against the tree. He whispered, "I'm here to warn you. Stand easy." He didn't know if the young warrior understood his words, but he understood his strength as he fought for breath under the pressing arm. Ezra slowly removed his hand from the man's mouth and said, "There are warriors coming through the grass yonder," pointing with his chin. "We have to warn Strong Bull." He repeated Bull's name in Spanish, hoping the young man understood. When the warrior nodded his head, Ezra stepped back and whispered, "Let's go," and followed the lookout to the lean-to of Strong Bull. Their presence alerted Bull at their approach, and he sat up, reaching for his new rifle. He recognized Ezra and started to speak, but was stopped at Ezra's hand signal. He knelt beside the leader and whispered, pointing toward the grasses, There are many warriors nearing your camp. They do not know they were seen.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?